E-Truck Industry Technology Advisory Committee meeting. Like always, this meeting is being recorded. Next slide, please. And if you could drop your name and organization to the chat, we'd appreciate it. Also, throughout the presentation, feel free to drop any questions in the chat. We'll also have a discussion portion later. Next slide. I'm Nate Fernandez, Technical Program Manager at CalSTART. We also have Watson Collins, Senior Technical Executive at EPRI, Andra Rogers, Government Program Manager at EPRI, Ken Lim, Technical Leader, Electric Transportation at EPRI, Yasna Tomic, Vice President at CalSTART, and Liz Hellier, Project Manager 2, Clean Fuels and Infrastructure at CalSTART. Next slide. And we see here all the different stakeholder groups that make up this Industry Technology Advisory Committee. We have charging infrastructure organizations, OEMs, fleets, government agencies, utilities, and ports and associations. So thanks again, everyone, for being here. Next slide. So the agenda for today will be our brief E-Truck updates. We'll cover our heat map, our findings on fleet needs and technology maturity assessment and acknowledgements. Then we'll get into our streamlining stakeholder processes for utility upgrades presentation, followed by a roundtable discussion with utilities. And then we'll wrap things up with other items and next steps. And with that, I'll pass it over to Watson for our project overview.
Yeah, and thanks for everybody for joining today. Really appreciate you making time. And I see a number of folks have typed their name and info into the chat, and you know, really appreciate that. And again, as we're going through stuff, this is intended to be a dialogue. So you know, please ask questions in chat, raise your hand. We want to make sure that we get a dialogue going with you. Just to remind you what E-Truck is, you know, everybody's got their own day jobs. So what E-Truck is funded by the California Energy Commission. And it's to create a research hub to develop and deploy high-powered charging infrastructure in the key freight corridors, and really accelerate electrification of heavy-duty electric truck market. And so there's a portfolio of goals and objectives that we have around this project. Around equity and workforce development, we want to engage with stakeholders. That's, you know, core and central to our objectives here. We have activities around market needs and technology assessment, and so that's where we're trying to understand the market and do technology assessment. That's an important role for the ITAC, is to give us, you know, help be the eyes and ears to the project and provide us feedback on the work in that area. We have R&D activities around high-powered charging and demonstration sites, and then ultimately coming up with a public corridor charging strategy. And then on the next slide, we start laying out, you know, what's the roles and goals and objectives of the ITAC. This group, you know, super important to this project, and it's really to react to things that we're, you know, the products we're producing, the things we're writing about, giving us feedback, making sure we're on the right track. And understanding the issues and the nuances in those. That's what, you know, we really need this group for, and help us inform, you know, these statewide plans that we're doing. So we're going to today run through a few of our activities, and then we have a roundtable to wrap up with the utilities. So with that, though, I'll turn it over to Liz to go over the E-Truck updates there.
Thank you, Watson. If we can just go to the next slide. All right, so the first update is on our heat map. So we presented heat map, what we're calling heat map 1.0, the first version at the last ITAC. So we've kind of integrated feedback from our various advisory committees and submitted to the CEC, and are waiting for the final green light to be able to publish the interactive map on the ITAC website, which should be happening hopefully very soon. So just a reminder of the information that we have on this first heat map. On the one hand, we are tracking medium duty and heavy duty truck volumes and behavior in California based on real-time truck GPS data. Also kind of where trucks are parking and stopping in California, kind of giving us an idea of truck flows. And on the other hand, we have also collected information on medium duty and heavy duty charging locations in California, so that are either currently open, being developed as we speak, or are planned in the short and medium term. Kind of looking at public locations, shared, semi-private, semi-public, and private locations in California. So that should be available on the website soon. But so we also wanted to give you an idea of the maps are a way of a snapshot to track or to present the progress of the eTruck project. So we are currently also developing the updated version of the heat map, which we are calling heat map 2.0, which should be coming out later on this year. In July 2024, we should have a kind of first draft for the ITAC to review. And so the second version will present the results of the modeling efforts for eTruck. So one of the elements is projected charging demand for public charging infrastructure. So we're looking at 2030, 2035, and 2040. And so here we can see at the bottom a sample or a test run of these modeling efforts to give an idea of how the information will be presented on the second heat map. Another key element is that we are able to isolate specific market segments. So for example, we can track behavior of drayage-specific truck movements in California. And so then we are able to identify the charging needs and daily charging demand for the drayage sector, for example. Also looking at long haul, which obviously have very different charging needs than the drayage and regional sector. Also kind of identifying the fleets that are not returning to home base at the end of the day. So we'll have maybe more of a reliance on the public charging infrastructure, for example. We also have coming up later in 2025, the final heat map, which will be kind of presenting the information that we have collected for the final corridor deployment plan. So this will kind of include all of the elements in terms of the freight flows and concentrations of truck movements, so we can start seeing kind of corridors and hubs and networks within California, kind of assessing where the daily charging demand is in California, and then including certain planning elements such as utility territory, grid capacity, land use, and equity metrics. So kind of finding priority areas for equity concerns, for example, disadvantaged communities, tribes, and impacted communities. We've started work already on the equity metrics, so that should be also included in the second version of the heat map here. So kind of giving you an example of where we're going towards with these heat maps and why we're presenting the information that we are for the first version of the heat map, which should be available soon. All right, so you may also have seen the draft version of the Fleet Needs and Technology Maturity Assessment being circulated around ITAC members for review. So thank you so much for everyone that has provided feedback on this draft version, which has been submitted to the CEC. And again, should be published, we're looking at probably the end of May. So giving you kind of here a snapshot of results from the assessment. So just a reminder, this presents the results from the engagement efforts as part of eTruck. So we interviewed OEMs and tier ones on the truck manufacturing side, EVSEs also, and then collected around 100 surveys, interviews, and focus groups focused on the freight industry. So this includes fleets and ports and kind of specifically drayage related contacts there as well. And so one of the key findings is that public infrastructure availability is needed to drive the ZEV adoption, because this kind of came up as the key barrier for certain fleets in order to transition for their medium and heavy duty fleets. This affects certain fleet categories a lot more significantly than other categories. So we have, for example, identified the smaller fleets, the owner operators that kind of fall into the general category of trucks that do not have a home base, and for example, a private depot to be able to add their personal chargers at, which would be significantly reliant on this public infrastructure availability to be able to transition. Another area of focus for the ITAC project was kind of identifying ZEV adoption timelines within the fleet sector. And as you can see by the chart on the right-hand side here, when we asked the respondents, when are you likely to start transitioning to zero-emission vehicles, we had significant variations within survey respondents. So on the one hand, on the left-hand side here, we can see that over 40% are thinking of switching between now and 2030, meaning that they have already started the planning process for the transition. Think here maybe the drayage sector that has more stringent regulations around transitioning, for example. And then on the right-hand side, we see that there are certain respondents that haven't started the planning process for the ZEV transition. So either are not thinking at all about the transition or are only thinking of replacing their vehicle at the end of the economic life. Again, this varies significantly by market segment. So we are using this information in order to, when we predict charging needs, for example, by 2030, we will have different adoption rates by market segments based on information collected here. Another area of focus for the ITAC project is tracking high power charging and more specifically MCS technology readiness in California. So currently we have a few pilots that are able to go up to 1 megawatt, but we're looking more at a maximum high power capacity level at around 750 kilowatts in the United States. And there is a general consensus that it will be integrated in the market by 2030. So within the kind of projected charging needs, we are integrating this information and having different MCS market integration rates by 2030, 2035, and 2040. Also identifying kind of use cases for megawatt level technology. So we have also found within these interviews that fleets want to disrupt the least possible their kind of day-to-day operations. So megawatt technology is one way of doing so, kind of significantly reducing the charge time, for example, for opportunity charging within the regional and drayage sector, but also for long haul, which have a specific timeline of when they can stop for currently refueling, but in this case, charging as well. All right, and now I'll pass it on to Watson for acknowledgements. Thank you. Sorry, Watson, I think you're muted.
You'd think I'd learn by now. So, is there any questions from folks for the truck team on these? What I think is really great is we had a number of reports early on that were just kind of like readouts on what our survey findings were, and this last report that sometimes inside the team we'll call 3.4, that fleet needs and technology assessment, that summary report, that's really the integrative and synthesis of all the information out of that, and it's kind of really important. And I encourage folks, like, if you haven't provided comments, still provide comments to us, because that is really kind of where where we're going to start moving into this planning phase. So to me, I'm really excited about that report. I did want to just acknowledge some folks. When we were planning this meeting, the team was talking and we said, wow, isn't it great that the quality of the comments we got from a number of people here, from Argonne National Labs, the CARB, Caltrans, Travel Centers BP team, the Forum, and Port of San Diego, and Volvo. Like the comments were so valuable. We've integrated those. We really appreciate those. And really wanted to kind of acknowledge, because we know everybody's got a busy job. They've got their own responsibilities, but they all these folks from these organizations stepped up and really helped us produce a better product. So I really do want to acknowledge that and say that the input was actually used really to help us make something better. So that's really encourage you as we that's the purpose of this ITAC, is to provide that feedback, help us be better, help the industry be better, and move forward. So I don't know, Yasna, do you want to add anything to that the thanks?
No, that's good acknowledgement, Watson. I appreciate it, and we really do count on you and take your input seriously. And so just want to say that there's others probably that we didn't mention, and if so, we will do a better job next time. But
yeah, yes, thanks. Yeah, so let's we'll move to the next section, and this next section is really a discussion on the stakeholder process for utility upgrades, and we can kind of move forward there to the next slide. And there's been there's a whole bunch of stakeholders and interconnected processes around electrification of transit fleets, and this utilities and the service connection process is a big player in the whole work of electrifying fleets. And so there was, I think, coming out of our last ITAC meeting, there was a suggestion that we have a more deeper dive into this topic again. So we're listening to you. We're trying to integrate your comments and feedback. And so we set aside a chance for this topic. So I'm looking at this question of like, starting with kind of like a challenge, or, why aren't the service connections happening swiftly enough? When you look at this is kind of like, one way to summarize the connect the lots work that EVgo does. It puts it into kind of 4 buckets around the supply chain. There is acknowledgement that there's lead time for equipment such as switchboards and transformers, and it's a really challenging and important issue. There's when utilities or upgrades are required, it actually triggers a longer process inside the utility side. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that in the next slide there and forthcoming slide. Yeah, we'll stay on this one, the one before that first. And then on the frontline utility staff processes, there's not as mature of a process for EV service connections. Right now, consultant, like if you compare that to buildings, there's consulting engineers and the utilities have developed decades and decades of experience of working together, knowing the expectations, and know how to exchange information between the two consulting engineers, design engineers, and utilities on how to advance projects to connect buildings. That level of maturity doesn't exist in the EV service connection world, and so there's a lot of a dialogue that happens back and forth between the utilities and people advancing projects, trying to make sure that that the service is sized appropriately, again, there's a cottage industry of watchdogs and utilities making sure that they don't gold plate things. And so the utilities are always cautious about overbuilding just because there's people that watch for that. And so that's why there's still a evolving maturity around how do you navigate through the service request process. And then there's just the normal course of business issues from like easements for utility equipment, outage timing, weather interruptions, and things like that from storms. So there's, these are kind of the things that, folks like Connect the Watts from EVgo have identified, but we want to use that as a jumping off point to say, okay, we kind of understand some of these problems, but how do we fix them? I'm going to spend, if you now go to the next slide, we'll start talking about ways to fix those. But I do want to talk a little bit about the utility grid and how to think about that. So the good thing is on the utility grid as a system, it's really well positioned to serve electric vehicle charging. There's been numerous studies that said, the ability to generate power for EVs and things like that it is will be achievable, manageable. And these studies have existed for over a decade now that says, like on the at a system level, power level, that the system is pretty well positioned for electrification. So the nuance is now is that there's challenges, and like you saw in the last slide, there's a bunch of challenges, and what are those challenges, and what's going on, and how come Watson's saying the grid's well positioned to serve electric vehicles, but then I can't get a service connection in time. And I want to kind of like describe this a little bit, and I'll use this chart. And so EPRI did a survey of utilities across the country. This isn't just one geographic area. And we said if you had a load, and in the survey called it spot loads, but if you have a spot load that's 1 megawatt, 5 megawatt, 10 megawatt, 20 megawatt, what's the likelihood that you'll need upgrades? And they also, in the survey, we have a little bit more detail on what kind of upgrades are required, but I simplified it for the purpose of this. And so what you see is if it's a 20 megawatt load, almost 100% of the time, the utilities are saying, oh, we're probably going to have to do upgrades. That could be, new lines, new feeders, in the utility parlance, new feeders to a customer, might involve new substations, upgrades to substations. So when you get into the 20 megawatt zone, it's almost universally acknowledged you're going to need some major upgrades. And then as the power levels go down, 10 megawatts, it's almost all the time, and down to 1 megawatt where it's about a 50-50 chance. Now these are national surveys, and each utility is different, and each utility is positioned differently. To understand this, like, a typical McDonald's restaurant may be 200 kW. So just to give you a sense for when we're talking about EV loads and the power levels here for some of these sites, I gave some examples of what those are. So this just sets the context of the higher the power level. It's not the challenge on the generation side of having power on the grid. It's getting the power to that specific location. Sometimes is a challenge, and it gets, and it's really more just the technology gets more challenges as the power level goes up. And so how do we on the next slide, how do utilities kind of how do we think about a process so that we can get ahead of this as a utility? And so typically what happens in the buildings world, and you know, you have a vision plan, you design it, and then you connect to the utilities and say, hey, here's the service request, and then the utility designs something. And then typically with buildings, it takes, you know, and when you're in the higher end of that diagram that I showed on the previous page of longer timeline, you know, more work required, there's time to actually build the building, and that aligns better, and these processes align better. What we're finding now with EVs is we have to get this information into the distribution planning cycle on the utility side earlier. So waiting till a service request happens actually is too late in the EV world, if we do that. So what we're trying to do, you know, one of the ways we're going after this challenge is with this GridFast tool. We'll start rolling this tool out in at the latter part of 2024. So this tool and making this available to utilities and fleets of getting this pre-information so that the utilities have a better chance of planning for this. You know, again, the utilities are interested in doing this work, and they just need to know the information in the window of time so that they can act and prepare. And so we can kind of go on the next slide. There's kind of like a whole portfolio of industry initiatives aimed at tackling the service connection challenges and ways we can do improvements to that. So part of it is like, you can kind of think of this in 3 buckets of information of the EV forecasting. So how do you forecast this, in, like, so that utilities have better visibility into information so they can act ahead? Okay, act ahead of that traditional service request. Second column is like, how do you do some process improvement, coordination improvement? That's also like, you know, what can be done to improve the current practices. And then there's also work needed on the regulatory side, so that you know, the regulators on board with what's needed. So these things all have to happen together in parallel. There's not a silver bullet, one silver bullet to fix all these. And the good thing is there's a lot of activity going on in a number of these areas. This is a little bit of an EPRI-centric version of the slide, and so excuse me for doing that, but in our EVs to scale work on the forecasting side, we've published this thing called eRoadmap, and it's available on the web. If you search eRoadmap EPRI, you can find that. That's starting to help provide information on where these EV loads are likely to occur. That GridFast tool that I described on the previous slide is an effort to actually have a customer validate the information. So it's essentially, one way to think of it is GridFast validates the information that's in the eRoadmap. There's a grid up activities. NREL has and DOE have some analysis. On the process improvement side, EPRI's just kicking off with Burns and Mac, Black and Veatch, and PNNL, a project on called GridFast Express, which is looking at how to do process improvement. And I talked about that exchange of information between utilities and EV customers, large EV customers. It's trying to provide some standardized information and templates and things like that, so that we can have a better dialogue. EPRI also has the scissor project, CIISR. There's interim solutions of how do you do flexible interconnections, and ways to push forward solutions. Like a location may have 100 trucks they want to electrify by 2030. They may be doing 5 in the first year and 5 in year 2. How do you provide solutions that create the glide path towards what they're doing, but allow them to get to the 5 trucks right now? And CalSTAR has an EV energization roundtable. EPRI and the e-truck team will be producing this BEV truck toolkit. And there's work on this Charging Smart and these regulatory roadmaps. But it's, I think all these activities, we'd love to, include people that want to get engaged in these and get feedback and provide feedback on these. But it's exciting to see that there's so much work on doing this, and the utilities themselves are doing work on process improvements and how to do forecasting, and so that's really exciting that like there is attention to this and actions being taken here. On the next slide, we have some other initiatives that are focused here. We do a lot of work with RMI, and so they're working on some regulatory principles to get involved in here. I mentioned EPRI has this EVs to scale activity. And again, if you can search EPRI EVs to scale, you can find more information on that. We see work in the New York, really cool that there's some proceedings in New York around this, and so there's really some great activity there around medium heavy duty trucks. And then EDF has this building the grid to need. So again, I didn't cover everything here, but like if somebody knows of other things, please type them in chat. This is just an example of things going on there. And then on 19, on the next slide here, we have a little bit of a discussion over the EPRI and his work with utilities. The utilities have shown a lot of interest in looking at interim solutions and flexible service connections to expedite this thing. So like this isn't a picture you'd use for a fleet location, but like when somebody's building a home or building a small building, there's an interim service put in, a temporary service, and sometimes fleets are wanted to try out and get some practice with 2 vehicles at first, and so there's a number of utilities that are exploring how they can provide an interim service on a temporary basis for customers looking to kind of move that way and have a smaller number of trucks. There's also a lot on the utility side with utilities starting to test out this notion of flexible service connections where if a customer is asking for, a fleet customer is asking for 5 megawatts of power, the utility may be able to provide 5 megawatts of power for 97% of the time, and there might be 3% of the hours in the year where there might be they may not be able to provide the full 5 megawatts, but they can provide an interim solution while they're building the upgrades, so that something can be done while the upgrades are being advanced. So there's a lot of great minds and ideas coming forward in this area. And again, if anybody in the chat wants to type about some of the ideas they've seen on their side, please please type those in. But that, I just wanted to give a flavor for some of the things on the utility side, and we'll kind of leapfrog from that once we have the discussion and roundtable with the utilities on that. But I'll turn it over to the next slide for Liz, right?
Thanks,
No.
Watson.
Yeah.
Yeah, so just to touch a little bit more on processing coordination improvements, CalSTART organized 4 roundtables, our EV energization roundtable, and we gathered stakeholders from the EV ecosystem just to address challenges and solutions in streamlining and expediting energization, especially for larger commercial EV projects. So the first thing is that CalSTART and CARB are convening a group of states called the Affinity Group. This will provide a forum for states who have adopted or have stated their intent to adopt the Advanced Clean Truck Rule. This forum will really enable peer exchange of information, which will be useful to adoption, and it'll shape federal policies relevant to zero-emission trucks. And then our roundtable emphasized the need for utilities to have long-term plans, ideally 5 to 10 years from fleets, in order to effectively plan infrastructure upgrades and avoid stranded assets. Another thing that came to light was improved data sharing, and just transparent communication is going to be critical between utilities, fleet, original equipment manufacturers, and electric vehicle service providers to enhance grid capacity, project planning, load management, demand forecasting, as well as infrastructure development. So collaboration among this EV ecosystem, as well as with regulatory entities, such as CARB, CEC, and CPUC, is going to be vital for accelerating these grid enhancement efforts. Some strategies that were identified include sharing telematics data for future planning, as well as aligning incentive programs with utility processes. So in terms of innovation and future planning, the use of microgrids and alternative power generation is currently being discussed and or implemented in the industry to manage grid capacity issues. Also, the deployment of new technologies for automated load management and the use of flexible interconnection strategies to manage peak load demands and enhance grid reliability and capacity. In terms of developing incentives, we want to make sure that they are performance-based and offer multiple value adds to the grid, such as distributed energy resources. And something else that was determined as a solution would be, in order to streamline permitting, would be targeted collaboration and resources, which could be provided to authorities having jurisdiction, potentially through a centralized permitting portal. And I will pass it on to Liz.
All right, thank you, Lisa. So as part of the eTruck project, we are in the early stages of developing the eTruck guidebook for advanced BEV charging. And one of the elements of this guidebook is a BEV infrastructure toolkit, which will be published on the eTruck website. And it will include kind of all of the elements that are kind of needed to develop infrastructure and kind of chargers for fleets, either on a public site or private depot. So this includes permitting, timing, service request considerations, design guides specifically targeted towards, for example, high power charging, MCS, and heavy duty charging station guidelines, siting considerations, and also we are kind of in the early stages of collecting links to relevant resources for fleets to be able to prepare for charging infrastructure development at their site. So just, we are in the very early stages, but I have my email and Gia's email here at the bottom of the slide. So if you are interested in kind of providing feedback on information that should be shared in this guidebook, please reach out to either myself or Gia. And we are kind of in the early stages of thinking of creating a subcommittee on this particular topic as well. And I'll pass on to Yasna to start the roundtable discussion with our guest utility speakers.
Thank you. Well, that was a lot of information I feel like we shared out here. So during the roundtable, we might have room to also have questions from you all. If, however, you feel you want to comment, please use the chat function and feel free to add your comments in there or questions as well. Any questions that we don't get to during the call itself here today, we will follow up definitely via email later. So just want to make sure that we have about 40 people on the call. We want your engagement. So with that, just wanted to introduce maybe the 3 or 4 utilities that will join us today as guest panelists on this pretty important conversation about, the utility engagement programs, plans, related specifically for us here, selfishly for medium heavy duty. But we're happy to hear also just overall how the utilities have different plans for electrification of transportation. So we're happy to have 4 utilities today from San Diego Gas and Electric. I guess I should spell out the full name. Christopher Roberts, who's Senior Customer Solutions Advisor. And thank you for being on camera. And I'm going to invite the other ones to be on camera as well. From Los Angeles Department of Water and Power, Scott Moon, who is Electric Transportation Programs Electrical Engineering Associate. Thank you, Scott, for joining us. And we had a good discussion the other day. So happy to have you and LADWP in this. From Southern California Edison, Jordan Smith, who's consulting engineer on grid technology innovation. And thanks, Jordan, as he is a good partner here all the time. So we are grateful. And locally here from my neck of the woods, Pasadena Water and Power Department, Evan Johnson, who's electrification program manager. So I just wanted to welcome and introduce the 4. I think my dear colleague Watson is actually going to facilitate and manage the conversation. Again, invite you guys to be on camera, of course, and everybody else can be on camera as well. It helps us be in the room, so to speak, together. So again, Watson, you want to start up the dialogue with our panelists?
Yeah, no, thanks. And also, people that are on the webinar here, please join in with questions. Just raise your hand or something like that, and join in on the questions. Chris, I'll give you a warning just so you're prepared. I'm going to start with you first, since you're on the left side of the picture there. I know this question's like, how could utilities engage, but like, what would be kind of like the top things that you know, like lessons learned you know, like from San Diego Gas Electric? What are like the top lessons learned and top priorities, and like how can we make this thing better, or what are you doing to make it better? What are those top 2 or 3 things?
Yeah, well, I mean, for me personally at San Diego Gas and Electric, behind my image here, you can see a little portion of our service territory. That's probably the most important for me portion of our service territory. Does anyone know why that may be? That section back there, that little plot of land? It's because we have Mexico right on the other side. So that's our international border crossing, commercial border crossing. And that crossing synergizes and interacts with maybe larger trucking areas within California, but not necessarily in our service territory. So many of these binational fleets, they will frequent Port of Long Beach, they'll go to the San Bernardino rail yard, and they'll have a hub in Otay Mesa, that international border crossing. We have up to 5,000 trucks crossing a day, and I anticipate that number to increase as nearshoring becomes more prominent and as more electric vehicles are purchased to meet the same duty cycles as ICE trucks. So what was the biggest challenge for San Diego Gas and Electric under those parameters is just educating, speaking to the fleet owners. Many of these fleet owners, They start off with their owner operators. They start off with one truck, and then they buy another truck, and then they buy another truck. And all of a sudden, this, truck driver one day has 200, 300 trucks in this massive fleet, but he may not necessarily be too familiarized with, the laws and regulations that are coming his way. So my efforts have been primarily to have direct sit-down meetings with fleet owners and explain to them, the ACF rule, and also the economic benefits to electrify. Because there's a silver lining, right? You do get, better returns on your energy consumption versus diesel long term. So explaining to them that, aside from the benefits that we're all aware of, helping the environment, helping our local communities, disadvantaged communities, there's also an economic benefit as well. So speaking to them, getting their information into the pipeline. One thing I noticed when I started at San Diego Gas and Electric was that we would wait for formal applications to come in from clients before responding to those applications. So what we've done is we've created an electrification risk committee. So we go out and we speak to clients directly. We're proactive in engaging them, explaining to them, what the ACF rule entails, what their electrification duty is. And we take that information and we bring it back and we elevate it to the highest levels, our executive level, so that we can react in a faster way than we would have traditionally. So to answer the question, it's to reach out and have face-to-face conversations with fleet owners and bypass the traditional methods of intaking information as a utility and be more dynamic and quick in reacting proactively to the information that we intake.
That's a good point. That proactive approach, and that's great, Chris. Hey, Scott, I'll go left to right. So Scott, any reactions to whether top lessons learned, challenges, reactions to how to engage with fleets and prepare the grid.
I think Chris said it pretty well. I think being proactive is an extremely great approach rather than taking a reactive approach. We try to make information available for fleets to plan ahead of time, like our rebate program that's available online, and our capacity maps, so that they can anticipate any particular grid challenges that they may encounter if they try to submit a large application for several chargers at one facility. But yeah, I think Chris really said it pretty well.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Jordan, anything to add there?
Well, yeah, no, I think, we're all kind of in similar positions there with trying to help fleets, trying to get information about electrification plans to inform our planning process, and then working on the grid side so that we can be ready to serve. And I've talked about this quite a bit in the past and previous presentations, and kind of shared a timeline with sort of tasks that need to take place, or steps that need to be accomplished along the way, and the steps that the fleets need to take on their side, and then steps that the utilities take, and sort of making sure that coordination takes place, and things progress smoothly along the timeline to get a project done. And so we've got a lot of experience with this by now, with our charge ready infrastructure programs, going back to 2015 or so. And frequently, hangups can occur sometimes, and they can be at certain steps. They can be at permitting steps, or they can be, waiting for customer side engineering designs. And certainly there can be capacity issues as well. And we do have what we call a TE advisory service, which helps fleets be informed, and we're constantly trying to learn, listen to fleets and learn about their electrification plans and what those look like. At the the same time, we're working on no regrets grid upgrade practices to make sure that we've got the base infrastructure ready to support no matter where these depots with electrification can pop up. We're also looking at technology options. I am the chief engineer of our EPIC program, where we do a lot of work on new technologies, whether they're charging, load management systems, DER integration. We did launch a new pilot recently called load control management system, which is something that we're looking at that can help fleets with getting that electrification in place and getting service, active service, while capacity upgrades are taking place in parallel. We're looking at new service options also that may include transportable mobile energy storage systems. So a lot of work going there on both sides, both on the grid side and also interfacing with the fleets and helping with TE readiness.
Thanks for yeah. We're gonna just have a chance to introduce himself and talk about priorities and lessons learned.
Sure. For Pasadena, I would say the same thing is kind of going on with other utilities, right? And I think the big thing is talk early and talk often with fleets. We don't have that many in Pasadena. We're a little bit smaller, but we are a city as well as being a utility. So we are building our own public side infrastructure that's available for the public for both medium duty and for light duty. But we still try to figure out how to work with fleets on the harder, medium, heavy duty options. So just being involved, being transparent to what our challenges are to our customers when they are looking for more power or new site locations. But we're also pretty active about trying to find locations ourselves and then partnering with private partnerships to work with us. I think that's been working really well. We have 4 joint sites that we've done with Tesla. We've had Rivian come into Pasadena. So, there's new options out there for trying to find those public-private partnerships that I think would be a good avenue for Pasadena as a city and as a utility.
That's great. Yes. So I think we heard a theme of proactive dialogue, and there's a lot of programs that are out there to discuss. Again, folks, that are participating here, please type in questions. This is your chance to ask people that are really expert on this. The questions that you might have there. Again, and this one I'll just throw out to the group there. Have the programs that y'all have the programs helped streamline the process? Because some of these programs are like a Make Ready program or rates program. Have they helped raise awareness, help streamline the process? It has, has that really helped on this process, or we still stuck with some of these challenges of supply chain issues and things like that for some of this? I know, Jordan, SC has an enormous amount of programs, right? And sometimes the programs actually uncover challenges once you have those, right? And that because you have substantial make ready programs and things like that, right?
Right. Yeah. So quite a lot of work has been done there. Thousands of ports installed by now, and making good progress throughout light, medium, heavy duty, and a lot of experience working with fleet industrial customers. The supply chain, you mentioned supply chain, certainly that's an issue across the board. Everybody, I think all of us utilities, will be nodding with that, as well as customers. Just everybody is dealing with those issues right now. And costs, construction costs have gone up substantially. So costs and timelines have really, there's a lot of pressure there that everybody's feeling that. And everybody's trying various techniques, whether it's trying to, everybody's trying to stockpile. When everybody tries to stockpile, then that just exacerbates supply chain issues. But I think there's we'll have to work through those issues, and it's pretty broad based attack to work on those issues. I think but on the technology side, we're looking at ways that new ideas, new options that can mitigate some of those issues. And for example, we're pretty interested in solid state transformers and DC power supply. That's something that we think could reduce some of the equipment needed and some of the footprint and clearances and that type of thing. So it's pretty early stages, and a lot of work needs to be done with standards and testing and certification. But that's something that we're working on. It's an example that could potentially help and start kind of a new paradigm here. I did think it's worthwhile to mention to the group here, I did just recently launch a new working group, and there's a lot of interest and on SSTs or solid state transformers, and we're having our kickoff meeting a week from tomorrow, so on the 25th. So yeah, just feel free to leave a note here, make sure you get on the roster. But that's an example, Watson, of some things we're looking at that could be innovative, that could help with transportation electrification and service options and supply chain and everything else that's kind of presenting some challenges and barriers right now.
Right. I see we have a question here from Kevin. Kevin, do you want to read that, or do you want me to?
Yeah, hey, thanks.
Hey, Kevin.
Just a kind of a question on, and really maybe trying to assess the challenge supply chain.
Is it just me, or
Yeah, you're breaking up, Kevin.
Okay. I'll read the question. So I'll leave this to any of the panelists. Have utilities compared existing available capacity for medium voltage distribution feeders versus projected large truck EV loads at specific sites? And same question for existing fleet interconnection sites that expect to electrify, and how much capacity needs to be installed at a fleet site? Anybody?
Yeah. I can address Phil's question first off. Phil, good to see you.
Okay.
Or good to hear your text in the chat. We are working on upgrading electrical infrastructure prior to fleets having contacted us. So the situation specifically at SDG&E was we were seeing, based on our historical load increase, a very small increase that did not square with what we knew or anticipated the ACF rule to do in the Otay Mesa region. So we hired a company called Quanta that's not only studying Otay Mesa, but other impacted regions in San Diego to quantify that ACF rule and the megawatt load increases that we're going to see in our service territory. And the differences were staggering. So within the next 10 years, we're talking about 200 up to 300 megawatts increased demand that we had not quantified previously. And you can imagine what a disaster that would have caused if we would have waited for customer applications to come in to get, you know, DC fast chargers in their yards as they needed them. So yes, at SDG&E, we are proactively working on bringing in this information now in order to prepare for this large, medium duty, heavy duty fleet electrification.
That's great.
And
Any
then,
other?
oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah, and then as far as upgrades, I mean, we just recently got approval for 2 new circuits in OTI, 2 new power banks. I'm sure that's going to lead to a new substation in the near future. That said, we'd also like to take advantage of the existing capacity on our circuits at our substation by limiting how much, you know, chargers can output at certain times a day, so that we see a more consistent usage hour to hour, instead of, you know, everything reaching 10 to 11 megawatts at peak hours and then dying down later at night.
Great. So, so doing a little compare of light duty to medium heavy duty, when you think about it, the light duty EV charging is spread across the grid, and the medium heavy duty they're bigger vehicles, so they need more energy, and then they tend to depot together. So now we're talking about that comparison. Any other lessons learned from the light duty space that are helping us with the medium heavy duty and planning for infrastructure? Again, there is a little bit of a difference because they're bigger vehicles and they tend to congregate, but any other lessons learned there from like charge management approaches, or the flexibility of this load? Do we think that this load is flexible and can be fit into the capacity of the grid?
I think, Watson, we've got a lot to learn there. This just gets into sort of, you know, behavioral issues, and for fleets, it's really more commercial behavior than personal behavior.
Yeah.
So it's different. It's definitely different, and along with the differences with fleets being, you know, very concentrated loads, large and concentrated loads in certain areas. Whereas, you know, residential, you know, really kind of gets spread pretty evenly, and there's a lot more flexibility there, and but we're learning about that too. But it's different, and so the fleets are totally driven by their business operations, and so I still call that behavioral, even, but it's a business operation basically, and so we need to, you know, that's one of the things that we need to learn, and then, you know, that determines the flexibility. If you take the operational energy requirements, so how many miles or operations need to be performed every day, and then you subtract, you know, the 24 hours in a day, and then you overlay that with, you know, with the time of day periods for electric demand and costs, and you know, that when you do all that math, you know, at the end you get some level of flexibility, hopefully, but in some cases, you know, depending on the operation, there may be very little, if no flexibility, but it totally depends on, you know, what those operations are. But I think, you know, and back to Kevin's point, which I think is relevant here, it's and we, you know, we're constantly looking at this, constantly doing long-term planning, and planning, forecasting, and planning is a formal process that the utilities undertake, and then there's also a sort of a bottom-up approach, where we look at sites where we know there are going to be significant fleet electrification loads, and then, you know, get somewhere in the middle, and so that's an ongoing process. Looks like Chris wants to weigh in there.
Yeah, as far as the behavior of fleets, and since because I have so many of those face-to-face conversations, I'll just share what the use case is going to be um in our service territory. So as these fleets, especially with drayage operations, are purchasing these electric trucks, they're going to be using them for cross-border operations. So why is that? Because they're very short distances. It's 100, 120 miles a day, and most of that time these trucks are going to be idling. So electric trucks much more efficient in that sort of stop and go traffic idling scenario than an internal combustion engine. So these drayage operators, they're going to try to continue to use their drayage, their regular ICE drayage trucks while they are still registered and they're still eligible to work at the port and meet those same duty cycles. As those trucks go out of service or are no longer allowed to frequent the port, then they're going to start moving those electric trucks that are being used for cross-border operations to go to the Port of Long Beach, to the San Bernardino Rail Yard, or wherever, opportunity charge there, then come back down to the border region to drop off cargo. So I've seen fleet operators move in that direction. They're finding, which routes have the most idling time, the least amount of miles required, use those trucks that are being mandated by the ACF rule for those duty cycles, and then move them into more demanding routes as needed.
Can I jump in, Watson? I was wondering if I could jump in with a interesting conversation, but I don't want to. My question was, I think that's a good observation, Chris. In addition to the depots, we are having these shared charging sites that are popping up, which are either private, shared, or designed that are outside of depots, right? It's not public, it's not depot charging necessarily. How are you all the utilities preparing for those? Because those are larger size, like the ones built at Port of LA, or Watt EV opened another one, Forum is working on another one. And how are you preparing for those sites? That's one question. The other question is, maybe I wanted to go back what Watson was asking in terms of the programs you have. Do you really feel that the programs you've been having and introducing are helping move the ball? Like, have things dramatically or semi-dramatically changed, at least in the right direction?
Let me jump in from Pasadena. So Pasadena is a little bit unique in that we don't have these really large depots. We're kind of built out. We're a fairly small city, compared to the region. And we're going to be probably that opportunity charging, right? So we're going to try to get, trucks and medium-sized vans that are going to come from Long Beach Port or Port of LA that need to maybe get to Riverside or, kind of San Bernardino areas, but need to find somewhere in the middle that if they need opportunity charging. So that's why we're building out. We're using a lot of the grant funding programs to help do that. But we're not going to have these large depots of like 100 trucks or 10, 15 megawatt stations. So, but we need to have locations where everyone can find some reliability and understanding that they do have options along the way if something does go wrong. So I think that leveraging the grants we get, whether from CEC or from Energize or some of these NEVI funding locations, that we're going to have maybe 10 or 15 pull through sites, not 100. And that we have locations. So I think that, again, the public-private partnerships are important, kind of talking to Port of Long Beach, Port of LA, talking to the different types of companies that might be coming through Pasadena is important. And then, doing what we're doing now, talking to other utilities, talking to other locations, is kind of how we collaborate and figure out how to make a network that works regionally, not just, individually. So I think those things are really important. That's kind of my take on how, Pasadena is able to help the larger whole of the LA region and what's going on.
Mm-hmm. Good example. Thank you, Evan. And I know you have, like, as you mentioned, with 4 large Tesla sites that you have, even though that are light duty, they're fairly significant still in power pool. Any quick experiences from that inform your next steps?
Sure. So we actually are continuing to build larger sites, somewhere between 24 to 50 level 3 chargers. Now we're kind of transitioning more to including these 12-foot to 14-foot wide spaces that can accommodate medium duty vehicles, whether it's the new FedEx, e-vans or Rivian vans that are coming around. So we're trying to accommodate larger vehicles at our depots that can, help with the transition, because we are going to have a lot of these last mile delivery vans that will be coming around Pasadena that need to find a place to charge. Even though that they have probably a charging station at their home at night, they may need to find the opportunity charging during the day, whether they're taking a lunch and want to add on a few miles, while they're taking a break. But, we have to think about, the last 5%. You might have a home charger, but we still want to provide things that are in the field for you in case it's needed. You may have a long day. You may have Christmas time coming up where vans are out for longer periods of time. So we need to think about that last 5% also, not just the main 95% of what they're doing daily.
Yeah. Any other reactions to Yasmin's question there from others?
Yeah, so I mean, at San Diego Gas and Electric, our Power Drive 4 fleets program, specifically directed towards fleets, has been a massive game changer, right? So there would be no increase in awareness in the fleet community here if it wasn't for the active engagement, the active outreach that we're working on under this program. We're going to transition the program the next couple years into an advisory service, which is really what we're doing now. Just because a company doesn't qualify for Power Drive for fleets doesn't mean that we're not advising them and helping them through the electrification process. So yeah, these programs have been truly everything in order to educate the fleet community, obviously with groups like your own and the California Air Resource Board.
Thank you.
So I was gonna I reach out to Scott here now. So Scott, your utility is home to the ports there. So but what's your any thoughts on what's LADWP and doing with the fleets and the ports and how do you navigate through preparing your grid and planning the grid and responding to fleets needs there?
So as far as our preparing our distribution system for for electrification broadly, in terms of light, medium, and heavy duty, we look at all the historical data for grid demand at all of our feeders, all of our circuits, all of our substations, and forward-looking trends on transportation electrification, any data sets that we can get there, as well as other moving parts like solar, battery storage, all these other moving parts that can affect the net amount of demand. We layer that into a forecast and use that as a basis for preparing our grid. There is communication with entities like the port on our on electrification plans, so that we can be proactive on on getting them ready to support their needs. And as far as if I can tell if our programs are working, I can see from our funding dashboards that's all publicly available that it seems to be working. So that just indicates success to me there.
That's great. That's great. So I'm going to ask a provocative question here. So like, somebody may ask, hey, utilities, hey, you guys, we've been talking about electrified for 10 years now or whatever it's been, and electrification's coming. How come you haven't upgraded all your circuits so that everybody can connect in a seamless way? I know that's a provocative question, but maybe get some folks to also ask the other questions. So I saw Chris, you kind of like you seem ready to jump in on that, right?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Next question.
Okay.
No, I'm just kidding.
Okay.
No, well, I mean, I think I touched a little bit upon it in the past. I mean, the culture was we would wait for real applications and then we would respond to those applications. I mean, the ACF rule is essentially converting utilities into the gas station for all commercial vehicles. This is a huge change in day-to-day operations, huge change in culture. So we're responding to that as best we can now. I think there was also some uncertainty for the ACF rule. I know I keep on repeating ACF rule, but that's the reality, is that trucks or companies are making this transition to meet the requirements under the ACF rule. And there was uncertainty whether it was going to proceed in its current form, whether it was going to allow natural gas to be included. I mean, these are massive, expensive infrastructure upgrades. So I don't think any utility wanted to be in a position where they built something out and then had to backtrack after the fact. Now I think there's a little more certainty and things are proceeding as is. So now we're responding accordingly.
I don't know, Jordan or Evan's got any
Yeah,
additional? Yeah.
Yeah, I'll jump in there. Yeah, it's the utilities have been around a long time, and sort of the way they operate. In the case of SCE, over 130 years, we're regulated. All of us are regulated entities, and we operate in a manner that is directed by our regulating boards and commissions, and so part of that is how and what we can spend money on, and also obviously our tariffs and our rates and cost recoveries. And so it's a regulated activity, and so if you're going to be building a lot of infrastructure, you have to have an ability to recover those costs, and so that's why there needs to be a matchup. I mentioned this process that for forecasting and for planning, and these are processes that involve stakeholders, and it's directed and approved by governing commissions. So we need to make sure, that's all just to say in a simple manner, that you don't really build infrastructure for load that's not, or customers that are not there. And so how do we make sure that things are kind of aligning together? And that's the process that takes place. And so you get intelligence, and you improve the forecasts, and you get a better handle on how things are coming together, and then you get approvals to go and build infrastructure. And so that's what we're really getting good at and spending a lot of time on, is getting the forecasts right, and making sure, I mentioned this no regrets policy, that making sure that we've got sort of the backbone available, so that that sub transmission and everything up to the actual line extension or service extension to the customer is robust enough in certain areas that we anticipate a lot of growth to support customers coming online when they're ready. So it's a very involved process. I would say historically, the system has worked. If you look at historically, as housing booms after World War II, introduction of air conditioning. If you look over history, the system has evolved and grown to support customers successfully, and so that's what we're doing now. We're going to be able to support electrification just as we have historically with all the other growth.
Okay. I do have a last set of questions, but I do want to leave room, any folks like TA or the ports or any of the other folks that have fleets or serve the fleets. Any questions you have for the utilities? This is your chance. I see Paul. Yeah, go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, so just hopping in there, I really wanted to just thank the utility for this this kind of everything that's kind of been brought to the table, especially around the ACF matters and recognizing those as a driving force and a forcing function of helping the utilities understand that this forecast is real and something that will be mandated moving forward. I really appreciate that perspective. I think what that kind of, as I was thinking through this, like I was kind of thinking about how right now the current state of things is energization isn't necessarily going that well quite yet, and there's really an opportunity for an all hands on deck type of approach where we're really pushing policies and evolving policies in a way that helps the utilities really get the resources that they need so that they can ultimately advance towards achieving these infrastructure goals and objectives. And so I just wanted to kind of frame it as, there's an opportunity here to really engage in a manner with the utilities to help drive in resources so that we can go ahead and set up that future infrastructure moving forward. Right now, for example, and as the team was alluding to here, there's the open CPUC docket on energization and other places. This is an active matter right now where we can really help drive change, setting up that future in a way that kind of takes that all hands on deck approach. So just wanted to kind of bring that to the table as well. So appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, and it acknowledges that utilities aren't able to act unilaterally. They have to work within a context of, for IOUs, the regulatory authority or the public power within the parameters that the municipal or city government has provided them. Just to wrap this section up, if there's any other questions, I did want to wrap this up section with from the utilities, each of you, what's the wish list? How can e-truck help or industry help, or it seems like there was a lot of discussion over information and data so that this forecasting process could be a better understood and planned for, and Paul even mentioning engage and make sure that there's that the regulatory support behind that. But is there wish list from each of you on the things that e-truck could help with, or industry could help with, or the fleets, or what's your ask for people?
For Pasadena, I think looking at it, I think just industry wide, I think looking at transformers and switchgear, trying to get that supply chain, the amount of time it takes to get those down, I think would be really helpful, just to kind of increase the amount of projects that we can do. So sometimes it's taking 18 months to get stuff in. So I think that would be a big boost for us to get some of that equipment in a little faster.
We have some suppliers on this call, so they're hopefully hearing you.
Scott, you're ready. Chris, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, my wish list would be for e-truck to serve as a nexus for fleet owners, right? So whatever services a fleet owner can go out and acquire online, like Gas Buddy, where are stations located? What's the pricing going to look like? What's my cost per mile? Just making it a very easy, palatable transition from ICE to EVs in a way that's understandable for fleet owners, because they don't have the privilege and the advantage of the exposure that we do to understand the transition, understand the costs associated. So really gearing that information towards them, and also having a Spanish version for everything.
Great. Scott, anything on your wish list?
I think just communication regarding our our programs would be extremely helpful. We do our best to make everything publicly available, from rebate information to capacity maps, and I think communication is extremely key as far as that kind of information, and the fleet owners' plans for electrification. We're here to serve the city and the broader public.
Great. And Jordan, any wish list from your side there?
I think those are all great from Scott, Chris, and everybody. Evan, agree with all of that. We've been pushing that also, communication and trying to understand the plans, and trying to figure out what's coming and when, and what are the implementation plans, how many vehicles, what's the schedule, vehicles per year, that type of thing. So that helps with getting information that way. The other way, information going the other way, are things about things that you mentioned, Watson, load management, some of these advanced technology techniques that we've been looking at, DER integration, those types of things, I think can be helpful to fleets as well as help with estimating costs, electrical costs, service costs, and construction infrastructure design examples, those types of things. A lot of fleets are kind of not ready, we found, for the engineering design that needs to take place. So sort of standard infrastructure designs that they could use and adapt to help with that, I think is also something eTruck could do.
Great. So the themes are there: information, information for planning. So utilities need the information for planning. That there is a need for more dissemination of information to the industry as a whole. And this fleet advisory services thing, because in the past, these fleets just bought a truck and went to the truck stop, or or had a supplier deliver the fuel to their location, and they were good to go. Electrification has a little bit more to it than just those two things. So and so there's some challenge, there's some activities that need to occur there. Any final questions for the panel here from others before we wrap this segment up here? I really appreciate their time and participation there. And I'll let the awkward silence occur here for a second. So. All right. Very good. So we can go to next steps. Nate, do you want to kick off the next steps there? And
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Watson. So for next steps, soon we will be publishing our industry outreach memo, our high-power charging infrastructure assessment technical paper, and our regional freight heat map 1.0. You can find that on our website. I think Gio will be on this slide for a second, if you could drop the link in the chat. And if you have any feedback on the Advanced Transportation Research Center or Test Lab, please send that over to Ken here. If you're interested in joining the subcommittee to discuss specific research topic areas for high power EVSE systems, email me. And you could also email me for any general feedback. And as always, we'll send out a follow-up email with the meeting recording and meeting summary notes. And if you have panel discussion suggestions, please email Liz Hellier here at her email. I think that's it for next steps. Next slide. And that's it, everyone. Thank you all so much for participating. And thanks again to our utility panelists. Great discussion, everyone. And See you next time.
Thank you,
Thanks.
everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.